Welcome to this talk entitled Realism Without Risk. This is all about using business simulations in the workplace to boost performance. I'm Kate Nichols, and I'm Head of Learning Innovation at Sponge UK. And what that means is that my responsibility is to make sure that we have the most forward-thinking, up-to-date, innovative solutions to drive real performance change in organizations. If I have to shout, I will. So who is Sponge? Well, we're currently Outstanding Learning Organization of the Year, which we're very proud to have earned that title. We do specialize in customized e-learning solutions, and for that we earned the title of E-Learning Development Company of the Year in 2015. We are also a top 50 creative company, and Creative England have given us that award because we're one of the top in the UK to be working for, and because of the creative digital work that we're doing with organizations. These are some of the clients that we work with. You can see that there across the public and private sector. And the reason I include that really is just to let you know that when we do seminars like this, we like to share experiences that we've had with those clients so that you can ideally relate it to your situation. And I'll be doing that today. I'll be sharing an experience we've had with GSK. So here's what we're going to be covering. I'm going to be introducing simulations a little bit. I'm going to talk about a case study, some work that we've actually done as Sponge with GSK. We're going to look at a few simulation benefits, and then I'm going to share a little bit about what we've learned through that experience that may help you if you're just starting out on thinking about simulations or going on your journey with them. So I want to start by asking you a question. Who can remember the Miracle on the Hudson, this event? It was in 2009 where this pilot, Captain Sully, flew his aeroplane 2 minutes after takeoff and landed it in the Hudson River. Who remembers that? Put your hand up. Brilliant. I mean, it was an incredible story. It was an exceptional event. And when we talk about kind of what happened here, when he was interviewed, people said to him, "Were you not scared?" And he said, "Yes, I was very scared. But I had to put my training into practice. I had to push my emotions to one side, and I had to focus on landing that plane safely in the river." And that's exactly what he did. And I think what's remarkable about this is that combined with his cumulative experience as a fighter pilot, passenger pilot, and also thanks to tens of thousands of hours in a flight simulator, he would have had to have encountered that situation many times before, leading up to this event. So he knew when this happened what the protocol was, what to do, and he was able to remain calm and have a safe landing with all these people on board in the freezing cold Hudson River. I think it's an amazing story, and it kind of sets the tone for what we're saying about simulations in the workplace. So what is a simulation? Well, we like to define it like this. It's an experiential learning event with real-time feedback. So what does that mean, though, in the business context? Most of you probably work for organizations, and if you do, one of the things that you may be able to relate to is the fact that traditionally businesses don't really give people a chance to make big mistakes like they do in flight simulations. They don't have to get the chance to deal with emergency situations. And what that can mean is that, consequently, sometimes these things actually happen in the workplace, costing organizations their reputation, costing them money, costing them time, damaging relationships, and that kind of stuff. So there are some cases where business simulations have been used, and some organizations are implementing them and have been using them. And traditionally what that might look like is this little black and white photo here, where people are in a sort of boardroom environment, and they're making strategic and tactical decisions in order to try and outcompete their business from one in another boardroom next door. At Sponge UK, what we have been focused on, and certainly as part of the innovation remit, is giving that a new twist. We've brought in gameplay, media, different levels of technology, and we've kind of reinvigorated what it means to have a live business simulation in your workplace. And we're really excited about this, so I'm going to tell you a bit about it. But before I do, I just want to give you a bit more about why simulations are so effective. And inevitably, there's a little bit of study and theory that goes along with this. This quote from Aristotle: "For the things we have to learn before we can do them, we learn by doing them." And I think what Aristotle's perhaps getting at here, or what I take from this, is when we're given the opportunity to have an authentic experience, it can really enhance significantly that learning for us. And simulations are a really great way of doing this. And the National Training Labs Institute in the United States did a study, and they found that when people did learning by doing, on average, there was a 75% retention rate. And if you compare that retention rate with other retention rates, so consider, if anyone remembers the Ebbinghaus curve and how quickly we forget, to have a 75% retention rate is quite a remarkable statistic. And that's from learning by doing. And there are some more compelling results. In 2013, Towards Maturity, who are an independent research body that specialize in the learning and development sector, they did some research on online experiential learning. And of the 50 organizations that they looked at, 3/4 of them said that they experienced improved engagement by using online experiential learning methods. And what's interesting about this is that over time, as they kept using these experiential learning methods, that engagement actually went up. So again, maybe you're using e-learning and you're thinking, are we getting the same engagement from e-learning year on year? Or is it dwindling off as people become more familiar, have higher expectations, as media gets more complex? This might be an interesting way of readdressing that question. 84% of people actually increase their engagement as they learn more and as the organizations used it more. Clive Shepherd, who you may know and who may well be here today delivering an important talk in the conference, he says experiential learning is more than just doing. And he says it has to add this important ingredient, reflection. And if we think about Kolb's sort of learning cycle with a concrete experience at the top, which then moves down into reflective observation, we can see that simulations, which we'll see in a minute, provide the opportunity to include both doing and reflection in one experience. I'll show you an example of a business simulation in just a moment, but in case you're thinking when you might use one, these are some particularly pertinent times in a business's life where you might want to think about it. Hazardous environments, oil rigs, where you've got the potential for loss of life, of course, or very serious injury. An oil rig would be a good example of that, or engineering maintenance where you've got mission critical things going on. That can be a good time to simulate those things so people know what to do when those situations, or if those situations arise. Emergency response scenarios. We work in Plymouth, near to the dockyard, which is a nuclear site, and they use simulations to practice what's going to happen in the event, God help us if it does, let's hope it doesn't, of any kind of disaster on the dockyard with the nuclear subs. Organizational change, so back into the head office, thinking about how you can use it within the business context. A really successful use of simulations has come where people have had new processes introduced, or where there's been a restructure, and now we need to learn how do we work, with this pharmaceutical company joining together with this pharmaceutical company, how are we all going to work in an aligned fashion when we have different cultures and methods of working? Or perhaps where there's a new initiative. So if the CEO has turned up with a new idea that they want to get across and want everybody to buy into, what can so often happen with new initiatives is that the CEO gives a big speech and everybody kind of goes back to work, and then 1,001 different permutations of that get implemented. By doing a simulation, people get to practice that before they have to do it in the real world. And finally, this, I think, is a powerful one. Increase awareness of my impact on the business. If I could tell you the number of times organizations come to us at Sponge and they say, if only this department didn't work in a silo and understood that its impact on these people over here is slowing things down or increasing risk or whatever it might be, that is where simulations can really help, because they give people a chance to viscerally understand that relationship for themselves. So let's take a look then at what we've produced so far for GSK. And I'm going to start with a little video, and I want you to watch this, and I want you to think of the last intervention that you did, whether it was e-learning, whatever it might have been, face-to-face training, and just consider what kind of a reaction it got. What I think is really striking about that set of reactions is that you can see that people are emotionally invested in the experience that they're going through. They've definitely been paying attention. They feel the highs and lows. Did you see their expressions? Some of them were like faces contorted when a decision was made that they didn't want to happen. Or when some good news happened, there were high fives. These are really powerful expressions and reactions that we don't often see in the workplace. And I was so struck by this that I thought, how can we make this a reality for other organizations? So let me tell you a little bit about the challenge that GSK faced. GSK have an onboarding program, and everybody goes to that onboarding program in Belgium. And it's a week-long program. And across the 4 days leading up to the final day, people are just bombarded with speeches and talks by experts. They get a thick book, you know, full of information. It's complete cognitive overload. It's fantastic information, and it's really important because vaccines are traditionally more difficult to sell than are, say, other pharmaceutical products because they're live, and people need to be credible in front of healthcare professionals when they go and sell them. And so what they wanted was something that was really going to engage people, that could bring together all of that learning at the end of the week. And before they had this simulation, they were using a chocolate manufacturing process. So they were sort of trying to say, well, you know, we're going to make chocolates, and it's going to be a little bit similar to making vaccines. And what was really good about that was that there was teamwork and social collaboration, and there were you know, big rooms full of people all getting together and learning. But the downside of that was that none of the chocolate making really aligned to anything in the business. They weren't able to see any kind of strategic implication for the decisions that they were making. And so they wanted something immersive and really engaging, which would help people be able to make those connections. So the solution was that we created what we've called VacSim. This is just a little intro slide from the beginning of the day, really. VacSim is a multimedia business simulation that brings together the best of digital, of video media, of gameplay, and also the live interactions that you have between people in role play, and pulls all of it together into a really immersive experience. The way it works is that there are typically teams of about 4 teams maybe, of about 6 to 10 people. And within each of those teams, you've got different roles. So maybe you've got the VP of Sales and Marketing, you've got the CFO, you've got the CEO, you've got the head of finance, you've got the head of HR. And everybody was given a pack with their role to play in the simulation before they turned up. Think of it as kind of a bit like a murder mystery if you've ever done one. And the way the play worked was that it was spread over a year in a day. So every 45 minutes, it would be cut into a new financial quarter. And within those quarters, people would have to make important decisions, like what tenders were they going to bid for to get work into the business? What kind of vaccines were they going to manufacture in order to serve their customers? What kind of resources were they going to need? And what implication would have on their finances? And also, what kind of hiring decisions and customer relations decisions did they need to make in order to be really successful? So each of these teams were playing against each other, and this is an example of the environment in which they played. So these are the 4 areas that made up their marketplace. But of course, business isn't as simple as that. If it were, we'd all be millionaires. Business involves surprises and risks and things that happen unexpectedly. And so what we really wanted to do was get people to practice thinking on their feet. So we introduced an element of surprise and drama. For example, halfway through Q1, there might be a fire that breaks out in the manufacturing plant. Or maybe halfway through Q2, you've got the opportunity to take on a salesperson, but that's a finite resource that all teams have to compete for. And actually, if you chose that person, it might be that they turn out to be a maverick later on. You don't know. These kinds of surprises would come to the learner in many forms, and the group in many forms. So they're all in their kind of boardrooms in separate areas, and an alert would come up onto their dashboard, which might be a news flash. And what you can see here is a news flash that we produced with a real news presenter kind of coming from the beating heart of the newsroom where they're announcing that something's gone wrong. And you have to decide what to do. Or it might be in the form of perhaps a WebEx, and you've got to listen to a WebEx, you're a participant in that, and you're listening to employees arguing about what to do about a manufacturing problem where they've got a labeling machine that they know is kind of almost on its last legs, and should they stop production and draw back, or should they invest in it, and what kind of implication that's going to have, and you've got to make decisions about it. And what this did, by adding these, it brought in drama, but it also really propelled the narrative. A little bit about the game engine then. So all of this is built on, it's cloud-based, and it's a web-based kind of engine. And it has 2 parts, the front-end interface and the sort of back-end interface, or the back-end technology. On the front end, this is the dashboard that you can see. So this is where people are putting in their decisions. They're making their bets on tenders. They're adding in their manufacturing lines. They're decreasing stuff. They're adding things in. And they're also given a real-time update on all of the actions that they're currently doing. So their financial summary is there. Their satisfaction from customers is there. And they can see their inventory. So everything is all in real time. Behind the scenes, there's artificial intelligence, which is helping to figure out if Team A and Team B and Team C are all making different decisions, what's going to be the ramification down the line. So for example, if a team chooses not to make a hiring decision in Q1, or a training, they miss out on a training opportunity for their employees. Later on, they might find that they've got a bit of a health and safety problem. And so all of that was handled by the AI. This is a little bit about the experience design. So this is how it works. In the beginning of the day, from a kind of architecture point of view, there would be a whole group briefing. So there'd be 30 or 40 delegates from all over the world that would come in, have this briefing, and be set up for the day of what they were going to be tasked to do. And following that, they would be broken into teams. And their teams, they'd obviously already allocated themselves what roles they were going to have. And in those teams, they then went and played the game. So that's the quarters that you can see in those circles. And that's where the different types of alerts would come in and give them things to do. But crucially was the end of the day. Because at the end of the day, everybody comes back to the same room to go through a whole group debriefing. And this was a really powerful part of it because it gave people an opportunity to share what experiences they'd had with each other and to have that experience facilitated so that everyone could learn what went on. But also, because it's technology-based, we were able to display all of the results for all of the simulation and for all of the decisions that the teams have made. So Team A could see what Team B had chosen in the same moment. And that was a really powerful learning experience. Now, I'm always a bit cautious about putting 100% up on any slide, but these were the results that were actually taken from independent survey. And again, the population was small, 40 people in this one simulation. And we've been doing these over and again, but this was just one population. But they said 100% enjoyed the game. Now, what I think is interesting about that is it's quite easy to dismiss that Kirkpatrick level 1. But when people really enjoy stuff, I think it means that they've had a really memorable experience. And so I just know, and I'll show you some of their feedback in a minute, that they are going to remember that, and they did enjoy it, and they were emotionally invested. So it's that visceral thing that kind of comes back in. 90% of them said it's going to be beneficial to their job. And of course, bearing in mind that this is part of an induction, that's sort of an onboarding, I think that's a really powerful statistic as well, because it shows intent to apply it as and when the need arises. I think I've got some feedback. If you can't hear it, we've added subtitles, but we'll try and see how we get on.
Just it gives you some insight in the importance of what you're doing yourself for the company, but also I think a little bit on the bigger picture and the way that decisions have to be made on the top level at the company. So I think I think that perspective can help, I think, me as well in taking things forward when I have to make decisions in my own role.
And it was a great experience to have that same feeling as our business have from time to time when they have tenders or some launches and etc.
Well, I think it reinforces a sense of urgency about the things you do in your daily activities and why things need to be done promptly but also correctly. It also reinforces the need to collaborate with cross-functional partners.
Okay, so I'm not the best cinematographer in the world, okay, but I think what's really striking and impressive about those pieces of feedback is that you can clearly see that and it's just freely volunteered, that, you know, I didn't ask them, as you could probably tell, what they were going to say. And they said they could see both the bigger picture, the helicopter view, and they could understand how their own impact was going to, how their own actions were going to impact the business. And I think that's really a powerful outcome of doing a simulation. So here are a couple of the benefits. Employees gain an understanding of the wider strategic picture. You can accelerate performance through highly immersive testbed because people have already modeled the kind of behavior you want them to have in the workplace. You can build critical skills in a realistic environment, and I know that decision-making and prioritization are really high on the agenda of most kind of executives in organizations that work with us. It deepens learning through collaboration, so we've got a huge social element to it as well. Simulations achieve unprecedented engagement, and we saw that through the very real reactions that people were giving in those videos. And it provides quality assessment data because technology is involved now. Suddenly everything is tracked. So just a few things about what we learned while we were doing this, about creating realism. So this talk was entitled Realism Without the Risk. And it really is about aligning the business needs to what's happening in the simulation. And that's not always easy. There's a big research piece that has to happen at the beginning of simulation creation. And we spent a long time visiting GSK, looking at their tender documents, spending time with SMEs, getting under the skin of business processes, understanding the kinds of situations that might realistically arise, working out what prices things actually would be, understanding the marketplace. All of these things needed to be understood in order to be modeled in a kind of very closely related environment, which we then did. So we created this familiar world, which I showed you a little bit of that before, where we had those different islands, and we developed these realistic challenges. It was really important to show real-life consequences, and we used authentic language and characters, so all of the people that had agency and authority in the simulation had real responsibilities in real life. And we tested it out with users. We didn't know at the beginning whether it was going to be 15 minutes or half an hour or 3/4 of an hour in each quarter. We had to work with learners and play test things in order to be able to figure that out. And they then told us, actually, this doesn't feel like it would actually happen for us in our business. So we would go back and modify it. So there's lots of kind of iteration in the development and creation. So that brings us to the end, and I just want to summarize with a few takeaways. If you're thinking about introducing simulations, we've seen how experiential learning can give employees an understanding of the bigger picture. We've looked at how technology can be harnessed and game elements to really create an immersive testbed and a highly competitive environment for people to engage. We've looked at how that learning's been deepened through collaboration across teams. We've seen how adding drama and surprise can really propel this narrative and help people learn those really kind of intangible skills of thinking on your feet. We've seen how the play statistics can add value to the feedback and at that debrief stage, because people can now compare very easily their performance against others. And we've seen some unprecedented engagement with a very impressive 100% approval rating. So if you have any questions or you'd like to talk about how business simulations could maybe be used in your organization, or maybe you're thinking what kind of situation you're in and whether a business simulation may be something that's useful, we're just behind you over at stand 11. You haven't got to walk very far, and we'd be really happy to meet you, hear from you, and learn more about you. Thank you very much.